We are here today, continuing our podcast work. I'm here with Alicia Cash, and our topic at this moment is the 8-inch frying pan, which comes from that little parable that I shared some time ago in one of these recordings. Should I retell? Can I retell that story, Alicia? Should I?
May as well retell it.
Will that bore the people out there?
They might not have heard it.
Okay. If you haven't heard this, there's an old man who's watching a boy fishing on the banks of a river, and he sees the boy. He's mystified because he sees this kid catching nice big fish, and every time he catches a big fish, he throws it back into the river, and every time he catches a small fish, he keeps it. He puts it on a stringer and keeps it. And the old man watches this over and over again, and the old man is accustomed to, of course, keeping the big fish. You know, he grew up that way. I grew up that way. Maybe you grew up that way.
I did that. Yeah.
Yep. And so he's watching this kid throw the big ones back in, and after a while, in frustration, the old man yells at the boy, and he says, "Son, I notice you keep all the big fish, and you keep all the small fish, and every one of the big fish you throw back into the river. What's going on?" And the boy looks at the old man as if he's talking to somebody who really needs education. And he says, "Sir, don't you realize I only have an 8-inch frying pan? That's all I've got." And so that's a metaphor that we're using in this podcast. The metaphor of the 8-inch frying pan, the way that we use our current assumptions, we try to make everything, all new information, fit our current assumptions, the current framework through which we see reality. We're calling that the 8-inch frying pan. The way that we some would call this reductionism. We take information and reduce it to what we already understand. That's called reductionism. Another way of talking about it is in Greek mythology. It's called the Procrustean bed. Apparently there was this person they called Procrustes, I think, if I might be mispronouncing that. But Procrustes he had a bed, and he would put people on the bed, and if they didn't fit, he would cut off their arms and legs to make them fit the bed. And that's become known as the Procrustean bed. That's another way of talking about the 8-inch frying pan. The 8-inch frying pan obviously is a more friendly metaphor, I would say, right? Would you agree?
Definitely a more friendly metaphor. But
Yeah.
you can also look at the territory is not the map.
Right.
Which is also another way, because a lot of times you break stuff down into something symbolic, but it's not absolutely representative. Words are not my forte.
That's all right.
But it might not fully represent the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And so it's important to keep that in mind, that even though you need to have some structure in your beliefs, that shouldn't be so rigid that you're not open to the fish that may be coming into your life, whether that's from God or from other people, that
Right.
build you up into a bigger, better person.
Yes, right. Yep. And that one way to say that is that the map is not the territory. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Your dogs desperately want to come down.
I hear a dog that wants to come downstairs, but they're not allowed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We might include the dogs at some point.
Yeah, we could bring them in. And they've got some things to say, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot to say. Yeah. Yep. As a matter of fact, they like frying pans.
Yeah, particularly if you cook them some bacon in it.
That's right. That's right. I was thinking about maybe one of the first times in my life that my frying pan was challenged, right?
Okay.
That the fish was too big in my life. It was when I was 18 years old. I had been raised in a very, very conservative Pentecostal tradition.
Yeah.
To explain that, some people will understand what Pentecostal means. but that means my church was a church in which there was lots of speaking in tongues, faith healings, and such. It was from what's called the Pentecostal movement. And really, that's a subcategory of evangelicalism in which I was raised, and which is a very usually a very conservative form of Christianity, is evangelicalism. And Pentecostalism is kind of mainstream in the sense that their basic beliefs are pretty much of the evangelical stream, what people would call evangelical. Anyway, so that was my frying pan. And the first time that ever got challenged was when I met a minister, a preacher, who was from a whole different tradition that thought very differently. His name was Lyle, actually. His first name was Lyle. And he thought very differently, and he challenged just about everything I had been raised to think was the only way you can see the Bible.
Yeah.
He was able to say, oh, wait a minute, no, here's another way to look at that. Here's how I look at that, right? Is what he said. And it was very eye-opening for me. It was the first time my basic belief system was challenged and then, I think, expanded in some ways from talking to this guy. So that was my first time my frying pan was challenged.
Yeah. I'm trying to think when my first time of having my frying pan challenge. I think one of the major times was one of my best friends is from Germany, and so her view on normal American behavior is it very often busts me out of my frying pan. There'll be all sorts of little things that we do.
Yeah.
But one that really struck me is because of their history, they teach about the Holocaust. Like it's really beaten into them about the history of what happened and where we went wrong and everything like that.
Right.
And then she came over here, and every summer, all of our kids are out there running around with shaved heads. It's buzz cut season.
Oh yeah.
And everybody buzzes their little kids' heads down, but little boys particularly, they're just kind of a toast rack of bones, and they're still growing. It's not that they're don't have food, but they're just they look. She's like, every time I go out, it looks like you're making your kids look like they just stepped out of the Holocaust. And they just got out of the camp.
Yeah.
And she's like, why would you do that to your children?
Oh yeah.
And it's such a, I don't even think about it, but now I can't see it without thinking about it.
Right.
And it's just, a difference in perspective.
Yeah, that's her frying pan.
Yeah.
That's a deep one too.
It is a deep one.
Yeah. I was just reading an article today on the internet about this kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I wrote down the name of it. I think I might have sent you a copy earlier today is all. But it's called A Few of the Many Ways We Distort Reality. Article by Karen Hall. Anyway, she talked about several ways that we distort the reality as it comes to us, which we would call the frying pan.
Yeah.
And she says that, for example, if you learned not to like somebody who wore high heels, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and the illustration she gave was maybe you're a woman and a woman with high heels flirted with your husband. She had red hair. Well, after that, you might feel a bit threatened by any woman with high heels and red hair, right?
Yeah.
Because that becomes kind of one of the frying pans you carry around, right?
Yeah, sort of an association or secondary association or something like
that. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing that we're talking about, and how easy we fall into that, right?
Yeah.
And she raised the issue, and I know this is true. Sometimes it's ways in which we're not even aware why we don't like somebody that we meet, right?
Probably should turn the sound off on.
Yeah, why is it we don't like somebody that we meet? My cell phone is on.
Just turn the sound off.
Yeah. I'll turn this
People
off.
like to call you.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're the popular one, not just sitting in a basement again.
Yeah, right, right. I could run for office just sitting in my basement. Right?
That would be the ideal way to run for office if everyone just.
It's been done.
It's been done. Well,
We
yeah.
won't go there today.
No, we'll try and stay away from politics. It's not really our thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, oftentimes we're not even aware of the frying pans that we have. I think that's one of the,
Yeah.
because you'll meet somebody and think, why, how come I just don't, never got along with Ned or whoever, right? Never got along with them. I just don't like them. What is it about that? And it may be triggers that you have that you're not even aware of, right?
Okay.
Like that. Maybe somebody with Ned's lack of hairstyle
Yeah.
or his way of speaking, maybe they grossly offended you years ago and you're not even aware of that, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that could be part of your frying pan.
Yeah.
Psychologists call that things that happen out of our awareness.
Okay.
We're not really directly aware of it. Yeah, yeah, and sometimes it's a formulas that we learn, and when something else just doesn't fit that formula, that way that we have of thinking of it
Yeah.
doesn't fit it, that we
It's
tend
discarded.
to we will sometimes reject it or feel confused by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. When something doesn't fit your expectations of society or whatever, it's very easy to just reject it. And I think there's, especially if you don't know that there's another way to live,
Yeah.
the concept seems very alien.
right, right.
Yeah.
Right. That's partly how we use the word alien, isn't it? That something that just seems very strange to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
One of the podcasters that I listen to is Michael Malice, and
Uh-huh.
he wrote an article back in 2014 talking about how he's always distrusted cops,
Yeah.
whereas that's kind of something new in our society, the distrust of police.
Yeah. Right.
But his family was from Russia, and in Russia,
Right.
the police were evil.
Right.
And there was like no worse thing than to call the cops. Because
Yeah. Right.
even if they went after the person you wanted them to go after, they probably going to come after you and your family as well.
Right.
So it's best to avoid them at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas in our society, we've been raised from a very young age to trust and kind of put them up on a pedestal
Yeah.
as being wonderful. And I think that there's somewhere in between that you can come to where
Yeah.
you recognize that there might be a necessity, but they aren't necessarily heroes, or I don't know. I'm still working that out in my
Right.
head. But
I had a former naval officer tell me in the last couple of years. He said he seemed to bristle a little bit at greeting every military person with the notion that they're a hero, right?
yeah,
Because he told me that his experience in the Navy was one of the first things that happened when he entered the Navy was they were told to keep all their stuff locked up because the other recruits around him, even though some of them were officer recruits,
yeah,
were not trustworthy. You couldn't trust your stuff around. So he said right away that put a little bit of a dent in his perception that every person in the military is some sort of a hero, right? So
Yeah.
that same kind of thing.
yeah. There's
Yeah, not everybody's a hero because of a certain category in which they fall. Yeah,
Right.
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 Right. Yeah, that's one of the frying pans.
It's kind of like thinking, oh, if someone's a doctor, then they're a good person.
Right.
They may not.
They may not
May
be.
not be. Everyone, the people are just people. You know.
That was the way he put it.
Yeah.
That people are people everywhere, no matter what rank they have, no matter what profession they're in,
Yeah.
whether they're clergy, whether they're military officers or combat veterans or whatever. People are people, and there's good and bad in all expressions of humanity. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes we lose sight of that again with the way that we've arranged our frying pan in life.
Yeah.
or the way our maps look, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And power corrupts. You know, you give people too much power over you, that can be a corrupting influence. And I think that's something that we don't always take into account when trying to understand why someone does something.
Right.
Sometimes we're just looking, well, it's not like they're making money off of it, but it might just be that they enjoy the kick of having power over other people.
Yeah.
And we saw that a lot in COVID, where
Right.
ordinary people who didn't have any power in their lives
Yeah.
really enjoyed turning in their neighbors or controlling their neighbors or
Right. Right.
coworkers or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was, they didn't get anything from it. They just enjoyed having power over somebody else
Right.
because they didn't have power over their own lives.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting insight into the human psychology there.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole COVID experience was, no matter what perspective you took, whether you're right wing, left wing, or in the center, and I tend to see myself in the center on most issues, but even then, you developed a way of like judging people, right? Like,
Yeah.
is that person not wearing a mask and they're in the middle of the grocery store? And I would automatically think, what's wrong with them? They're not wearing a mask. And that out of awareness, even at that point, that was my frying pan at that point, right? That stage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the idea of them sitting in their car with a mask and they're by themselves, and you're like, what's wrong with them? Why are
Right.
they
That's
wearing
the
a
other
mask
extreme. Right.
in the
Yeah.
car?
That's right. You don't have to wear that thing in your car.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was a lot of judgment from both sides of
Yeah.
how you should behaving versus, I don't know, just doing your own thing and letting people do their own
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
and it's hard not to judge. Judging is human. It's a very necessary
yeah.
thing, but it can be a very difficult thing to do
Right.
properly.
Right. In philosophy and such, in psychology, they talk about, in religion, they talk about man, the meaning maker, right? Humankind, the meaning maker,
Yeah.
that we make meaning. We also make lots of judgments.
Yeah.
And like you say, some of that's necessary because we develop as human beings needing to make judgments.
Yeah.
You don't walk into an open fire. I learned that early in life. I learned early in life when my neighbors told me to pick up a boiling can of hot tar. I did that the first time, and after that I never picked up the boiling can of hot. I formed an ability to make judgments in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. After picking up that can of hot tar, I had to soak my hands and keep my hands on ice for about 2 days after
Oh
that.
gosh,
Yeah.
that's rough.
Yeah, the neighbors got a kick out of that. My neighbor boys, growing up.
Yeah.
But I learned from that to make judgments about such things, right? So that's necessary. On the other hand, our ability to make judgments can go off the tracks, right?
Yeah, especially when
Okay.
they become like hard and fast judgments that you can't change.
Right,
Um,
right. So that's, I think this will be an exciting series that we engage here.
We should probably talk about our backgrounds before, since this is like our introductory.
Yeah, yeah. As an introduction, yeah, I'm from upstate New York, from a little city near Syracuse called Oswego, and I was born in a little town called Fulton, New York. This is all about 40 miles north of Syracuse. Known best for its horrendous winter, right?
Okay.
They have horrendous winters there, deep snow. My parents were unchurched, completely unchurched, and they were converted to Christianity in the early 1960s.
Okay.
And so I was raised in a very conservative form of evangelicalism, which I've mentioned, which is known as Pentecostalism. The denomination was called the Assemblies of God that I grew up in. And as I mentioned, I grew up, my frying pan developed from the age of about 5 or 6 in that environment.
Okay.
So I grew up with revival meetings, witnessing faith healing, attempts at faith healing, preaching about faith healing, sometimes harsh sermons related to either if you're in a relationship with God or you're not. There were some harsh judgments made from the pulpit in my childhood about that. So I grew up with a lot of that, and through the years, some of that got challenged. My dad was a logger. He had a logging business. Then later he had an excavation business where you work with the soil, working with drainage tile and such things. So I grew up working in the fields a lot with that job of my dad's. Grew up working a lot in labor out in farm fields, and helping with installing drainage tile, ways to drain the
Yeah.
wheat fields, the corn fields, the cow pastures. The most fun thing to drain was the cow pastures and the chicken farms, because you had to be down in the water that came from, shall we say, the cesspool related to the cows or the chickens.
The pre-dirt.
Yeah. Today that job might even be off limits because of the potential for disease, I'm sure. But yeah.
It was all organic, Larry. Why are you upset about it?
Right, yeah, right. Yeah.
About as organic as you can get.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I was breathing it in. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in upstate New York. We always distanced ourselves from downstate New York because of New York City and everything. You know, those are the two New Yorks.
Yeah.
Just like I later learned in Pennsylvania, there are two Pennsylvanias. There's Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh and its northern regions,
Yeah.
and then there's Eastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and its area, right?
Okay.
So just upstate New York is similar.
We've got like 3 regions of Michigan. Because
Okay.
there's lower Michigan there's a whole lower peninsula, but even the lower peninsula, there's a lower peninsula, and then there's the upper lower peninsula,
Oh yeah,
and then there's the UP.
yeah,
Because the upper lower peninsula is like separate from like Lansing and Detroit, and that area
Oh, yeah.
is more urban and
right,
more
right.
liberal, and then
yeah,
the upper lower peninsula and the UP is more rural and more conservative areas.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Just similar to upstate New York. Probably most parts of the country have that kind of
Yeah.
sectioning like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Where I came from, definitely redneck territory, we would call it.
okay,
Blue collar territory.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm from. Yeah. Yep. And so it's interesting how that becomes part of your frying pan, right?
it really does.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you look at
Yeah.
things and
Yeah.
people.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. My dad was a World War II veteran, combat veteran, Army Air Corps, technically. So I grew up with that, with his perspective on
Yeah,
reality, which was, as a teenager, of course, growing up in the 60s, I was often offended at his mentality. And as I got older, I probably adopted a little bit of his mentality as I got older.
it's amazing how that works.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of part of the process.
yeah, it
You got to
is.
break out of the mold to figure out what parts of the mold you want to put
Right,
back in.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm hoping at some point we go through the different branches of Christianity, because there's like a whole host of people that think, oh, you're a Christian, you must be like super conservative,
right,
high
right,
neck dresses, and
right,
there's
right,
a lot of baggage that comes on you
right,
whenever you say whatever religion you are, but it just seems like
right.
there's an aspect of
Yeah, a way of talking about the frying pans that people bring to that
yeah,
would be stereotyping, right?
yeah,
We stereotype people. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So I'd like to go through the different branches of Christianity as well. And then you also briefly considered becoming a rabbi.
yeah. I went through a phase in my life where even I was a Lutheran pastor at this point,
Oh, okay.
but I was exposed to a whole my frying pan got challenged once again, right? Even your new frying pans get challenged. I listened to a rabbi talking to a Christian theologian, a series of lectures, and I was so, my eyes were so opened to how I had judged Judaism, right? I had a stereotype of that, which proved not to be true at all, most of it, right? And so at the end of that series, I asked the rabbi, how would one go about becoming a rabbi? I was so impressed with his different take on what I thought about Judaism, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that was another learning experience that I
Yeah.
had. Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah,
So, yeah, I hope at some point we'll touch on that as well.
yeah. Because for one example, some of the Jewish folks have a whole different way of reading the opening chapters of Genesis than I was raised with, right?
Okay.
Yeah, just a whole different way of looking at the fall of humanity, what we call the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have a whole different way of seeing that,
Okay.
right? Whole different way of talking about sin, all of that. You can have the same language and the same text, the same Bible, and yet see things in entirely different ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and just getting from one Bible to another really changes.
yeah,
Because, like, in my small studies group at church, several of us will read from, like, we were reading from, what was it? I think it was Psalms we were reading.
yeah,
And what I was seeing on my Bible was vastly different from what she was reading from her Bible,
yeah,
and versus what my husband was reading in his Bible. And it does change. Like, you can have a similar sentence, but it can change the meaning drastically when you change even just one word.
yeah, yeah,
You know, the difference between saying, forgive us our debts as we forgive those who debted against us, versus forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. You know, those
Right.
are two different translations of that passage, and
yeah,
it seems very different. So thinking in concepts rather than in words
yeah,
sometimes
right.
helps.
When you translate something, yeah.
Yeah.
I know from the minimal exposure I have, the minimal training in the Greek language, for example, when it comes to the New Testament, just having minimal training in that is very eye-opening, because you can see ways that things are translated in English, but they don't have to be translated that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That makes a big difference.
yeah, yeah, big difference. Yeah, yeah.
I was never good at languages, so.
And I'm not great at them either. I've had a few courses in different languages like Hebrew and Greek and Latin, but I'm no expert in any of it, you know. I basically learned enough to know what I don't know, I guess, to be cautious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Who,
yeah.
who was that comedian that said, I only know English and bad English?
Right, yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember who that
Yeah,
who's that
yeah,
quote's
that's good,
from,
yeah.
but that's basically me.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah, it's it's interesting how your eyes get, the more you learn about something or exposed to it, the more your frying pan has to get a little bit larger, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just knowing that there's stuff that you don't know makes a big difference.
Right.
Like Jordan Peterson says, there's the stuff that you know, the stuff that you know that you don't know, and then there's the stuff that you don't know that you don't know.
That's right.
And that's just like a vast area, and it makes you feel really, really small when you realize
Yeah. Right.
how little we really know.
Yes. And how our present knowledge gets in the way of new knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that a lot in archaeology.
Yeah.
Where there's, you know, the standard expectation of where history starts.
Yeah.
And then you find some new cave. They found a new cave out, I want to say Turkey, but I'm not entirely sure.
Uh-huh.
And they found stuff deep inside the cave that suggested advanced civilization like thousands and thousands of years before
Oh, yeah.
even human Homo sapiens came around. It was like a previous form of humanity. Like
Oh, yeah.
Before Homo sapiens even existed.
Yeah, I know.
Like before that, so.
It's amazing, yeah.
And we didn't think that they were capable of those type of tools and
Yeah,
mining
yeah.
and burial and all these other things, and
Well,
they had
those are categories, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you got to rewrite history
Yeah, yeah.
and figure out, okay, what is it that we really do know? Because
Right. In a very practical area too, for me, I went to on a lark. I signed up for truck driving school in my
Okay.
40s. I was in my 40s, and I always wanted to. I'm always curious about that. I've always been curious, so I signed up for a tractor trailer training school. And when I went, I thought, well, this would be a piece of cake because I know how to drive a standard shift. And the first thing they told us in the school was, those of you who already know how to drive a standard shift are going to be in big trouble here, because shifting a tractor trailer is a very different pattern, a different way of shifting. And your knowledge, your present knowledge about shifting is going to just get in the way. And I found that to be true.
Oh, right.
That's very true. I had more trouble because I knew how to drive a standard shift.
Yeah.
So I thought I thought it was a piece of cake. It wasn't. It's a whole different way of shifting.
Yeah.
And that's an example I've used since then, of how present knowledge gets in the way of new knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not just like a mental knowledge, that's a physical knowledge. Because you have
Yeah.
the mental, like,
Yep.
the roadmap in your brain of how you physically should be doing this.
Right.
And you're doing it before you even think about it.
Yeah.
But it's not the right way.
Right. It functions in the way that they talk about musical memory, right?
Yeah.
You have musical memory. You can remember certain tunes and such things. Some people better than others. That's why they call it musical memory. But it's a similar thing. You know,
Okay.
You
So
have
you know-
patterns in your head already of things. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, my background is, did we want to talk about, you got more about your background? Or?
Nope. That's
Okay. So, I have almost no background in this subject.
uh-huh.
I was raised in the Upper Peninsula. It's a very small town.
What state is that?
Michigan.
In Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Upper Peninsula of Michigan, also known as DUP.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not asking the question. I'm just stating the location, not DUP. No.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a town. Like, I graduated with 30 people in my class. It's a K through 12 school. It's very small.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people never left the area. There are people that never left the town. Like, they physically never leave the town.
Yeah.
So, me just going to college, like, my parents weren't from there originally, so that kind of gave me more of an outsider's perspective, because anyone that's grown up in a small town, you know that if you're from there, you're from there for many, many generations, and if you've just grown up there, it's not the same. Like, you're still somewhat an outsider because your family wasn't born there, and
Right.
you know,
Right.
several generations have to be born before you're really from there.
Right. When I first went to northern Pennsylvania, I was told, if your grandparents are not buried in this town's cemetery, you'll probably never be considered a real part of this community. Yeah.
Well, that's the
There's a lot
difference.
of truth to that.
It's kind of the difference between, like, someone who's new to a community, someone who's got skin in the game, and
Yeah.
then those people are people who have got blood in the water.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, because there's a very different mentality of how you're going to handle a difficult situation
Yeah.
if your family's been there for generations versus you just moved there.
Right.
Or
Right.
maybe you grew up there from childhood, but it's still not the same as leaving
Yeah.
the bones of your grandparents.
Right.
You know, you're less likely to abandon the area to do something new
Right.
if your family's been there for many, many
Yeah.
generations.
Right.
You might go away for school, but you're going to come back.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Whereas me, like, I want to go back to where my family is, like my parents' house, but the rest of it doesn't feel quite as much like home.
Yeah.
Not like it does for my friends who grew up there for many generations.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have roots. Yeah,
Yeah, deep
different roots. Yeah,
and deep frying pans
yeah,
too.
right,
You
right.
know, there's an expectation of how life should go
Yeah,
because that's how it's always been for everyone in their family.
right,
So
right.
it was nice to get out. Um, and I went to Michigan Tech, got a degree in engineering, and I work as a materials technician doing failure analysis on engine parts using a
Yep.
scanning electron microscope. And that combines my analytical side with my artistic side so that I can kind of see how things go together and see patterns and see how things may have failed. And I think that being able to bring in a bunch of different data and kind of summarize it into one theory,
Yeah,
I think it's been very useful for me.
yeah.
And then I moved next door to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you introduced me to Jordan Peterson, and
Yeah.
then I went down this rabbit hole of the internet.
Yeah,
And I met lots and lots of people, and eventually came full circle back to you when
yeah.
you gave me the book, The Silence of God by Helmet Thielicke.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I
Sure.
read that in the course of one drive up to Michigan.
Oh yeah,
Like, you gave it to me just before we left
yeah,
for Christmas. And I read it on the drive up there because it's a small book, but it's a lot in there.
yeah.
And I was like, man, this really spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back wanting to, I think I waited a year before I told you I wanted to do a podcast with you.
Yeah, yeah,
And then we did another year of just talking about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now we're doing it. So
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I get there eventually.
yeah, yeah. Me too. Yeah,
But I don't really have a theological or psychological or I don't have the psych background or anything else like that. I'm just learning from Peterson and from you, from books I read.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot to try and take in when it's not your background.
It is, but then again, nobody's an expert on any of this, so
What, you haven't read every book?
nope.
So that we've read every book so that you don't have to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a favorite. Alicia's referring to a favorite dietary guy that I watch on the internet. He often says, I've read every major scientific article on nutrition throughout the year. I read every major scientific article on nutrition so that busy people like you don't have to.
What's his name?
Michael Greger, Dr. Michael Greger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we joked that we would include that we had
Yeah.
we have read
Every major philosophical and theological treatise
Yeah.
written in the last 3 years or whatever, so that busy people like you don't have to. That's right.
We have not. We assure
Right.
you we have not.
No, we've not done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But we'll give you lots of recommendations,
Yeah.
things to read.
Right. Yep. Hopefully this podcast will inspire people to look more deeply into a few things, into some things that perhaps they haven't heard about. Whether it challenges you, whether you agree or disagree, the idea being to wrestle with something can be helpful.
Yeah. And please do put your comments and thoughts down below. We'd love to hear from you, your feedback on what you'd like us to talk about. I think our first series is going to be on Helmet Thielicke.
I think so, yeah.
I don't know which chapter you wanted to go through first.
We can look at some pieces from this collection of sermons by Dr. Helmet Thielicke, a famous theologian who went through the experience of World War II in Germany.
Yeah.
Later became the chancellor of the university at Hamburg in Germany. But he wrote several books of sermons dealing with social, psychological, philosophical issues that plague humankind.
Yeah. And he was part of the Confessors Church doing.
Yeah, he was part of what was called the Confessing Church in Germany, which were those Christians who adamantly opposed the Nazi regime and opposed Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called the Confessing Church of Germany.
It would have been very difficult. to keep your faith in the midst of
Yeah.
an evil society.
Oh yeah. What was happening?
Yeah, and that's a
terrible.
lot of what he talks about.
Yep.
So
So we look forward to maybe looking at some of his material on the questions that arose during that time of tragic,
Yep.
tragic human evil, actually,
yeah,
and disaster.
and grappling with the modern face of war, which was far larger
Yeah.
in scale than had ever been before.
Right, right.
Especially when he came to the atomic. I don't know that he discussed it in the series, but
Yeah, I don't know if it's in this series, but he might have. I'm sure he addressed it later
yeah,
because he wrote several books later on as well.
yeah.
He did a lecture tour here in this country in the 1970s. He came to some of our seminaries and talked
Okay.
in the mid to late 70s.
I was reading that article you sent me about the.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I need to finish reading that.
yeah. Dr. Ed Schrader had studied under Thielicke in Germany, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll try
and,
and read that before next time.
yeah,
But yeah, so I think we're got quite a long podcast here.
yeah,
Close to an hour.
yeah,
Do you want to call it?
yeah. We can wrap it up
Yeah.
for now.
And maybe next time we'll plan on it when it's not around dog feeding time.
Yeah, right. We can
I don't know. We can figure that out.
if we get a couple of sponsors. You're welcome to be to
Oh,
have a sponsor you.
we do have. I will link it down below. I don't have the code yet, but I will link it down below where we will. We are going to have an affiliate with Coffee Brand Coffee.
Oh yeah,
They
good.
sell coffee,
Yeah.
tea, and hot chocolate. I personally drink tea and hot chocolate. I haven't tried their teas yet because they're all out. But their hot chocolate is delicious,
Yeah,
and it's made in the USA, or it's packaged in the USA at least. I think it's roasted in the USA as well, and they have a lot of different flavors of coffee as well.
that sounds
So-
good. Yeah,
Yeah. So if you click the link down below, you can help support the channel and
Yeah.
buy yourself some coffee and stay awake while we ramble along.
yeah. We won't immediately get into any embarrassing products.
No,
which,
not until we come up with some embarrassing products of our own.
right. That's right. That's right.
We'll try not to lead you down the path of
Yeah.
buying stuff you don't need.
Yeah.
But
Different.
if you want to support the channel,
Yeah.
best thing you can do is like, comment, and share, and recommend us to your friends.
Yeah.
And
Maybe we'll have Alicia design a T-shirt that goes with our podcast.
yeah, we'll have to come up with a catchphrase of some sort.
Yeah. She has the artistic skill to. She could design a T-shirt for something like this. Yeah.
I'll come up with something
Yeah.
that's not offensive
Yeah.
to too many people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. How do we want to close?
Well, we're glad that you're watching us on this podcast, and we look forward to our having further conversation that you can look at, and that you can form some opinions about. Hopefully, some good opinions. And we welcome some critiques as well. Notice I said some critiques, but we are looking forward to sharing more with you in the future. God bless you, and good day.
Amen.